reviews, and if it's like something in recent history, Time Magazine will be writing about it. So don't overlook newspaper and magazine articles, and if you don't know how to find them, go see your librarian. I was talking to Kathy Kempa the other day, and I said my students should be coming in the library to see it. So all the information is there.
And she said, what students?
Kathy Kempa is one of the librarians. She's not necessarily the librarian that you need, because she was thinking, I think, maybe Amy is more of an expertise in history. In any event, anybody can help you find the research databases. That's pretty easy. And the other thing I wanted to say real quick is your discussions are excellent. And a lot of what you're saying in the discussions, when, after you turn your paper in and then you're discussing with each other, oh, this is what I did. A lot of places, your discussions are better than your papers. Because I don't know if you have an attitude like if you're talking to each other, you can be more informal, or I don't know, you've thought about it more. But if you're interested in how to improve your paper, go back and read the discussions from previous weeks, and you'll see a lot of terrific context and a lot of terrific discussion. Yes?
When you say our papers, are you meaning like the ones that we have to do every single week?
Yes.
Or the big one?
No, I'm talking about the ones you do.
Okay, so
every
we
week.
need to like be more active. Okay.
Yeah. I'm all for actually grammar. A lot of you are not proofreading or writing in complete English sentences, and that matters. So, I'm not saying be less informal, like don't use good English grammar, but write as if you're talking to someone and telling them whether they should bother watching this movie or not, or if it was accurate. The thing that's coming up in discussions is a lot more pertinent in a lot of cases, a lot more incisive, a lot more insightful. So if you want to improve your papers, go back and look at the discussions and read magazine articles. Okay.
Ready to go. Let's go
U.S. and local. All right. Let's talk. Let's talk about people. So, films are not just a reflection of what happened, but also a reflection of how we want to think about ourselves or how we think about other people. So in a lot of ways, it's an idealized or an otherwise slanted view. So these are all rhetorical questions. You don't have to answer them out loud, but I want you to think with me. Think about how you would describe Americans. Exactly.
Well, I'm proud to be one.
I am proud to be one, but...
So, usually, the other times I've taught this class, we have been actually in Appalachia. So, when I say think about Appalachians, does anybody have any idea about Appalachians? Does anybody know where Appalachia is?
Yes.
Okay.
You mean like the mountains?
Yes. Generally speaking, the cliches about Appalachia are hillbilly, redneck, poverty-stricken.
Polk County. You mean Polk County?
No.
As someone who's lived in
Even
that
more
general, near that general area, not really.
Exactly. So now think of Southerners. I know Florida is a different
Different
idea
Yeah.
than Southerners.
Southern.
Well, this
But-
is deep stuff.
Think about your ideas of Southerners. Okay, you got this idea that we've got different regional characters. Here's a story. We're going to watch a movie. It's a buddy comedy, and it stars a New Yorker and a Texan.
Oh boy.
So you have in your head, right, an idea of what the story might be like, of what a New Yorker would be like versus a Texan.
Sounds
Now-
pretty hilarious.
And I would ask, is this really true? But we have these ideas, and a lot of times when we're when we're reading a novel or watching a film, if you go to a film that is billed as the buddy comedy between the New Yorker and the Texan, you're going in with certain expectations. And so that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about here in the national and regional, is the thoughts that we have about ourselves and the thoughts we have about each other. Okay, so think about the American character, you think about Southerners or Appalachian or Western or New Yorkers. Think about a stereotypical Portuguese person.
I don't know any Portuguese person.
I wouldn't
I
know.
don't know any Portuguese
Exactly, exactly. But I can bet you in Spain, they have stereotypes about Portuguese people. Now think about a buddy comedy where a Korean and a Filipino go on the road together.
Jeez.
Well, that doesn't mean anything to us. Exactly, because so if we were to see a film made in China about those Filipinos and Koreans, people in that region would have expectation and understanding about, oh yeah, that's the way they are, that we wouldn't get because we don't know anything about it. So what we're going to be looking at is those ideas and those stereotypes, and you know, they're not all stereotypes. There are regional characters, there are national characters, and there are national myths and self-identities. So we bring our own understanding to it. You know, our cliche says about the English, very hoity-toity. The Germans, very orderly. The Italians,
Nazis.
oh, they're all lovers. Is this the way the Germans see themselves? This is the way the English sees themselves? Is our ideas about other countries?
What about the French?
The French.
Gallus.
Someone's been to all those places.
Yeah.
None of those are true.
Exactly. So foreign films can be hard to appreciate not just because of the language barrier, but because the French might be making references to their own national character that we don't get in the way that we would understand if the Texan said to the New Yorker, oh, you and your New York, you know, we would get everything that he was suggesting.
They call them Yankees.
Yeah, exactly, but you wouldn't necessarily. So some story elements are assumed. Okay, so let us talk. Raise your hand in here if you are from Florida. Okay, raise your hand if you are not from Florida. Okay, where are you from?
Seattle.
All right, so we don't. Well, I guess we do have stereotypes about Seattle. Yeah,
Yeah.
South Dakota. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm from Seattle too.
Okay. Yes, sir.
New York.
New York. Okay, we all know about you. Okay, well now we're going to talk about Floridians. This is what we know about people from Florida.
Floridians.
Okay.
That's Polk County, especially in Mulberry.
Okay, so first of all, they're all swamp people. The other thing we know is, especially in Miami, we get a lot of crime, a lot of drug lords, a lot of murder. Hey, does anyone here, did you ever see Miami Vice?
Which one?
The television show.
There's two of them.
No, the original television show that was on the air in the 80s.
Don Johnson, yes.
Yes. It was
It was funny.
huge. Huge. Nobody thought it was funny. It was huge.
I thought it was funny.
Okay, this is, now this is,
California.
Wait, aren't they tourists from
Yeah.
other parts of?
yes, but that's the cliche of that Florida is filled with tourists. And I will say that this one is a Halloween costume. This is one of my favorites. This is a sculpture. The artist's name is Dwayne Hansen, and he does fantastic work in fiberglass. I've seen his exhibits, and they're life-size sculptures of ordinary people just doing their thing. They're so incredibly lifelike. So that's all fiberglass.
Dang.
There, exactly. So that again is
A lot of
is popular culture, you know, with this sort of idea. And then the last stereotype of Florida. The people in Florida are crazy. So,
You left out all the old people at the beach.
Yeah.
well, that was in the tourist. Okay. This, by the way, Elmer Leonard is one of my favorite authors, and he writes, this guy, he's very, very popular. I don't care for him. But he writes a lot about everybody in Florida is crazy. Elmer Leonard writes about Florida, Detroit, and Appalachia. So all up and down I-75. Yes, and that of course is Florida Man. You all know about Florida Man, right?
Was that the? I
Okay.
don't know.
for those of you from Seattle, Florida Man is like an internet character because there's so many headlines from newspapers that say Florida Man
Or Florida woman.
runs naked, through the mall. Florida Man swallowed entire turtle. Florida Man. So the joke is that all Florida Man is a particular person. So whenever you see a headline that says Florida Man, arrested on 14 counts of, something nonsensical, we're pretending. And when I Googled Florida Man, that's what came up. Okay. So, those of you who are Floridians, are you insulted by any of these stereotypes?
A little.
Do you
No.
agree with them?
I think they're funny and they're super true.
Exactly. You recognize the truth in some of them.
That's hard to explain of do I agree with them. People would see those stereotypes when they usually see Florida, but it's hard to say like when people are actually Floridians are usually just normal people, so they don't usually define them for what they are in Florida. So that's a style, so they had to go for it.
And so, actual life is nuanced and complicated. However, film and literature, by necessity, has to distill things. Yes, sir?
But it's also two different ends of the same spectrum now. So you have normal, blue collar, gator hunter.
Yes.
That's odd.
And
Meth.
what makes a more interesting story? Gator hunter on meth or
Blue collar.
well-adjusted, middle-class person taking their kids to the bus? So what makes a good story is not necessarily representative of reality. But I just want you to be aware of the associations we have with certain regions or certain nationalities and how this flows into our appreciation of films and novels. So, what is the most American of all genres?
Texas.
Western.
The Western.
And they suck.
The Western. Okay. Let me tell you something that troubles Dr. Wineland and I deeply.
The fact that they exist.
Is McKenna's comment, they suck. This is not the first time we have heard this. Since the beginning of film, and certainly before that, since like the 1880s literature, the Western has been crucial to our shared culture and our mythology and shared understanding of what it is to be an American. And your generation, we have found, and since it's so for 120 years, Westerns have changed, but for 120 years, everybody has loved the Westerns of their own time. The people from the 1950s, the people from the 1970s have embraced Westerns. And there's something about your generation that I have found from a number of students who are just wholesale rejecting the Western. And by doing so, certainly as historians, I'm not saying you have to love them, but if you do not give Westerns the time of day, you are missing an essential part of our shared culture.
I'm from the West.
Shut down.
So,
I saw the face.
zip it. I only got 50 minutes. So, the Western is the most American genre of all. This week's viewing is all about Westerns, and the quiz is all about the Westerns, so make sure you watch it. It's been with us since the 1880s, still relevant today. But the Western has changed a lot. It reflects not just the time that took place, which is usually around the mid-1800s, but the time in which the film was made. And this is true of all films, but the Western really carries it out. It reflects on race relations, the Cold War, Vietnam, fads. We looked at the steampunk Western last week. There are conservative Westerns and liberal Westerns and anti-establishment and law and order. There are black Westerns and Chinese Westerns and lesbian Westerns. There is a Western for you. It is the canvas on which the American story is told. But it changes over time. So I'm going to give you two examples. The first is Indian relations. So in 1939, this was the norm. Stagecoach, you'll read a lot about this week. This is one of the great westerns. There was a point in our time that the Native American is the other, the enemy, the person that wants to kill us, the people that we have to kill. They're savages. Yes, sir.
I mean, against the Apache, that was kind of justified in a way.
Well, we're talking about very broad
Ah, okay.
and
Apaches and Comanches, though.
exactly. Apaches and Comanches are a particular tribe in a particular period of time, whereas we have the tendency to just put all Native Americans into a box as if the Mohawk in New York and the Apache, in the Southwest are the same people. So, we did not differentiate at this time. They were all screaming maniacs coming to scalp us. Then, we eventually had a change. So here's a film made in the 1960s, and this is Paul Newman here. So Paul Newman is a white man raised by Indians, and a specific tribe of Indians, although I can't remember right now.
They look like Apaches.
And, we've got warriors who are respectable, and I guess this guy is a Mexican, but you can see they're integrating in a way, because this is the 60s, that we are, as a nation, really rethinking how the Native Americans have been treated. And although they still are the other, and Paul Newman, even though he was raised by the Indians, has now adopted Western ways, he still understands these. There's a level of respect and fully developed characters, although the film is still about white people. Then we move on to the Native American as wise sage, all-knowing, one with the earth.
Yes.
A mythology that, so we went from less than to equal to we should all aspire to be like the Native Americans. So this film could not have been made in 1930s because people were like, no one would go see it. You're nuts. In the same way that a film that demonizes Native Americans as mindless savages could not be made today. So when we're talking about this national character, we need to think about the time in which it was made, because very much people sincerely held these views at that time. Okay, now we're going to get to the good one.
Oh, please don't say one.
No, we're moving on just as soon as I can turn the page. To race relations. I gotta open a Coke for this one. All right. All the films I'm going to show you take place in 25-year increments. Birth of a Nation. And raise your hand if you were familiar with Birth of a Nation. Okay, raise your hand if you were not familiar with Birth of a Nation.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Well, it's dreadful.
Well, it's,
I mean, it's very
very
difficult to
long.
watch. It's long, it's silent.
and it's
Dreadful.
depicted.
However, it's one of the greatest films in film history because he's doing all sorts of new things that hadn't been done before in cross-cutting and characterization. But anyway, the gist is
What?
the blacks after the Civil War, when they got their right to vote, and this is a picture in Congress, he's got his bare feet up on the table, this guy's eating fried chicken. So, yeah, you're laughing, but this was a huge hit. And this was such a reflection of the time that even the president at the time was like, oh, what do you say? He said, history written in fire. Yes.
Did that say the fiery cross above there? Sorry, I'm trying to read the post here.
Yeah, it's
The fiery cross of the Ku Klux Klan. So
Good.
here we are in 1915, the Ku Klux Klan are heroes. Now I will say that this did not pass by with everyone embracing it. There were huge protests. This is actually what got the NAACP organized. And also there were many people around the country who denounced this at the time in 1915. 25 years later, here we get to Gone with the Wind. Now, the character is still subservient, but no longer treated as subhuman. So she's actually, Hattie McDaniel is actually one of the best characters in the film, whereas a lot of the other people are just really doing stupid things. Hattie is there, and the other black characters, you know, in the house, except for the one that doesn't know about birth and no babies. But Hattie McDaniel is, girl, you're doing a dumb thing. So we're not quite ready to integrate, but we are ready to recognize, and she did get the Academy Award, but she wasn't allowed to sit with the white people. So we're making little steps. Okay, so then the mid-60s, we get In the Heat of the Night. Has anyone ever seen this one?
Yes.
No, but I've
I've
seen
seen
some
some
clips
in
of
the
it and
movie.
how it's.
This one's great. So this one is where we move up to equals. So Rod Steiger, he's the cracker sheriff of a southern town in Georgia. And Sidney Poitier, he is a policeman from Philadelphia. And they're thrown together to solve a crime, and of course they hate each other. But as we all know, when you put the two mismatched people that hate each other at the beginning of the movie, and they solve the crime together, they end up respecting each other. So this is an excellent film, and it really shows, Rod Steiger is really showing the change of, once he actually gets to know a black person, and then he sees, you know, that this guy's a really good cop and everything. And so in the end, Rod Steiger actually ends up asking Sidney Poitier to stay in his town and join the police force, which at first he says he isn't going to do, but then he does. So, you know, this is 50 years from the KKK. Now, I'm 50 years old, so, well, 51. So this is in my lifetime. We have moved from the KKK to Sidney Poitier is going to take that and whack you over the head with it.
I thought the TV show did a
You're a son
good
of a
job
movie.
doing the race relations because the chief falls in love with a black woman and it's still not allowed.
Yeah.
And he has to keep it secret.
Yeah.
I love this movie.
So then we go another 25 years, and we're getting into that nobility. You know, we were there at the equals, but now we are ready to portray black soldiers as brave and heroic and really leaders of men. You can see that Matthew Broderick is a subservient character here. You know, whereas before Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier were sort of side by side, we're moving into a point that society is going to accept that this is a film mostly about people of color. Yes.
I would argue it's also Roy Drake's story too, because the whole point of it is that their stories run concurrently and they have to
Yes.
each other.
Yes. However, in 1915, yeah, they had concurrent stories, but you know, the outcome was very different. And certainly the number of people on the screen. You had two principal white people and you had maybe 8 or 10 principal black people with speaking parts. And so this is an elevation of, not only are we ready to see them as equals, but we are ready to acknowledge, you know, bravery and character. And then, 25 years after that, Django.
Oh,
Django.
You couldn't have put the original up?
What? This is Django.
no, there's an original
there's an
movie
original Django
called
Unchained.
Django.
That's not the
But
original.
it wasn't in 2012.
I'm talking about this movie called Django Unchained, so I don't know what,
Yeah, there's
Django
There's
is-
another
There's an
Western
original.
that's named Django.
was it made by Quentin Tarantino?
No.
No.
No, it has a
Then-
lizard in it.
Then it has absolutely no bearing on what I'm telling you.
No, you're talking
What-
about Django.
What I'm telling you is not about this word, what I'm telling you is about this film, Django Unchained, in which has anyone not seen this movie? I cannot in good conscience tell you to see this movie.
It's really good.
As an instructor at this college, I cannot recommend that any one of you see this movie. However, I will tell you that our friend Django here starts out as a slave, bent on revenge, and pretty much kills every single person he encounters, including Leonardo DiCaprio there.
Spoiler
And it is
Does he ever live in any movie?
a bloody, profane mess in which Django is not going to be kept down. He is, I'm trying to find a word to describe him that I can use in this class.
Well, hit the pause button on the computer and then say it.
He is a bad character. And,
Bad, is it badly written or just a bad person?
oh, it's a fan. I cannot recommend that you see this movie. However, if you're going to see a Tarantino film, so funny. So yes, he is a hero for the ages. Now, this is revisionist history, but my point is to have a film where this guy kills Whitey, every Whitey and a whole lot of blacks, and rides away the hero in the 125 years that we're talking about from, the African American senators barefoot eating fried chicken to my friend Django here. That is a huge leap in 125 years. So, when you are, my whole point of this is when that you are watching this, any of these films, not this one, you need to consider the period that it was made, the context that it was made in. Now, I will show you, these are protests about different films being made. This one, this Negroes Opposed Films, this is about the KKK movie, the Birth of a Nation. I mean, it was very controversial. That one is protesting it. This one is protesting Last Temptation of Christ. When I went to see The Last Temptation of Christ in the 80s, I had to cross a picket line to do it. People picketed for months about that film. This is about Last Temptation of Christ as well. And you guys, this is more recent. Do you remember the Oscars So White boycott a couple years back?
Yeah.
So there has been, since the very beginning, a lot of activism associated with films, with television, not so much novels, because it's easier, one person controls whether that's going to be published or not. But film and television, there's a long history in America of protesting racial stereotypes, political stances. People take their identity and their history very seriously. There is do you know what defamation means? Do not defame. So there's a Jewish anti-defamation league. So you're making stuff that is insulting Jews, the Jewish Anti-Defamation League is going to get organized and picket you. There's an Italian Anti-Defamation League. There was a time where all the villains were Italian. They were all mobsters.
Godfather.
Yes, around that time and before that, in the 30s and 40s, there was a real move among Italian Americans to say, we are hardworking people, we are shop owners, we're business owners, we are in your community, and we are not all gangsters, so stop making us the villain. Yes?
Wasn't there also a time when they did the same thing with like Germans and English when they were always the bad guys or something?
Yes. I do not know of any German anti-defamation league, but people do get organized, and they also, boycott shows because of particular political stances or people being associated. So it's not like Hollywood really has the freedom, they have the freedom to put out whatever they want. But the Americans also have a lot of control over that to say, one, just to not watch it, but two, to get out there and say, do not mock Christ. because we are going to picket in front of your theater. Now, I personally think that was wrong-headed, and the film is excellent. And they should have seen the film before they picked it, but
But that would require 4 or 5.
people want to be represented accurately and fairly. So are the protests reasonable? Yes. I would say this is entirely reasonable. This, to me, it's a reasonable protest, but it's not the fault of the Oscars, because that's the end point. If you want to protest, you need to make more films with people of color. You need more funding on the front end. Don't blame them by the time they get to Oscars. And there have been lots of years that was more racially mixed. So that was just for show. This, because they protested on what they heard and that was actually in the film, I think was perhaps a little bit misguided. But the most recent one, and it didn't get really big, but it was out there in the media, is the protest against the film Dunkirk.
What?
Well, it didn't show enough women. Dunkirk
Really?
shortchanged the role of women, and everybody should be equally represented.
Considering that not a lot of women were at Dunkirk.
Exactly. So there's some protests. For me, save your protest for when it's really going to, matter. So, protesting a battlefield film for having insufficient number of women is, to me, wrong-headed. Yes.
Couldn't you theoretically say the exact same opposite for Wonder Woman? Because there was not a lot of male characters in that movie. When there's literally an island full of
Have you
girls.
seen the movie?
Yes, I
Most of the
did.
movie characters are male.
I did not see the movie. However, that is not historically accurate, although it does take place in World War I. And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Is a lot of times you get this protest, let's say there's a character in it that is Filipino. And that Filipino character is a horrible person. And then the film gets to be a really big hit. And then all the Filipinos protest because, you're portraying Filipinos in bad light. Every story is just about those characters, just about those people. Now, in the case of Birth of a Nation, you could definitely make the point that what they're saying is about a whole race of people. But before you get on the bandwagon and complain, I would say in the case of Wonder Woman, because it's a story of an Amazon who lives on an island of all women, it perhaps is appropriate to have that be female-dominated. So it's not to say it should never be protested. The point I'm making is people protest. People get up in arms. And I want you to conclude that in your papers. And again, that's very easy to find if you do your research using magazine articles, because if you researched Dunkirk, you would very likely come across this, people protesting Dunkirk. Now, the other thing is when you're reading reviews, used to be, in olden days of yore, when people had newspapers, that only the people, the newspapers and the magazines were writing reviews. Now, everybody and their brother is writing reviews. I have a little old lady friend who's, I guess, about 80. She's an odd character, and her hobby is writing Amazon reviews. I mean, she has seen probably 10,000 movies, and she writes Amazon reviews. She loves it. Makes her very happy. But consider when you're reading reviews that there are advocacy groups, there are people with, axes to grind and
Personal biases.
personal biases.
Agendas they show.
Yes, and so be aware of that. You're much better off reading reviews. Not to say that the national reviewers don't have biases as well, but think about. So when you're doing this paper, I want you to think about the time that it was made in, the expectations and biases about certain people, certain areas of the country, whether that's accurate or not, and if anybody protested, if anybody objected to that particular portrayal. Okay, does anybody have any questions about the United States and, okay. So, things I want you to look at when you're looking at this. Is this story really just a story about, you know, the two guys in the buddy comedy? Or is this film addressing something larger? In the case of In the Heat of the Night, is on one hand a story about these two guys solving this crime. But what the film is really about is race relations. In the case of Dances with Wolves, the story's about this one guy who's out in the middle of nowhere and he makes friends with a wolf and then some Indians. But it's really about environmentalism and the treatment of the Indians, and, you know, it's on much larger themes. So I want you to look for the larger themes. Also, is this story saying something about America or Americans in general? You know, is it saying we're all brave and wonderful? Is it saying we're all racist? Is it saying we're stupid slobs? What is the point of view that they're talking about, not just in these particular characters? Some of you have been writing in your papers, this happens and this happens and this happens. We already know what happens. We've already seen the film. Talk about the bigger picture. And does it make assumptions about national, regional, or local culture? Are Southerners portrayed as hicks? Are New Yorkers portrayed as loud and pushy and insensitive? Are people from northern Indiana portrayed as just a little bit strange? You need to look at any stereotypes.
I'll take that.
And also consider, would a non-American get the context? You know, would they understand what they're trying to say about Americans or the American culture as a whole? Someone who's not from America and doesn't know the whole history of race relations might watch In the Heat of the Night and really only get, oh, it's about two guys that don't like each other and then later they like each other. And they wouldn't get that whole overarching context of where both of these characters come from. Okay, any questions? I will repeat what I said before for my time.
8 minutes.
I got 8 minutes. I will repeat what I said before. When you're doing your research, use the magazine articles, use the interviews. All your information is out there, blah, blah, blah. They're saying it all over the place. If you're not sure how to get into your research, to your interviews and your magazine articles, go ask your librarian. And if it's based on a real event or real person, the real events in person come out. Yes?
I found like interviews on YouTube. How would you suggest, like, is that possible to use that in your
Absolutely.
How would
Absolutely.
you suggest, like, I don't know, quoting or citing it? Yeah, just like.
Well, in the actual citation format, you know, there are guides to that, whatever format you're supposed to be using.
Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago style. You can just look that up and it'll tell you, you know, Entertainment Weekly or whatever. But a great, you know, example of that, as I was telling you the other week about how all of these sisters in The Fighter were all mad because they were portrayed as, you know, such skanks. And
Honestly portrayed.
but we know that because of their interviews, because of them going on Entertainment Tonight. It's not like anybody did scholarly research and write a book about that. The real people are saying, you know, I don't like that. So you can say, I saw an interview with the sisters.
Typically you have, the format would be, you would cite the web address, you would cite the date that you accessed it, and if you look it up under Turabian or Chicago Manual Style, how to cite video sources or online sources, they have.
Yeah. And YouTube is just a platform on which you're seeing it. What you're actually citing is an Entertainment Tonight interview or a 20-minute story, like say the guy who's the wife of the American Sniper did lots of interviews, and so you wouldn't necessarily cite that this was on say you saw it on YouTube, but what you're citing is that she was on 60 Minutes.
Oprah.
Yeah, one great thing I was talking about, Mark Wahlberg, the true life story, Wonderkin, he starred in the film Lone Survivor. Anyone see Lone Survivor?
Possibly.
It's a war movie. Does anyone have a guess about what Lone Survivor is about?
It's about this whole group of people that survived.
So anyway, so they're doing these interviews, and we saw this on a clip show. So Mark Wahlberg is being interviewed by somebody, and the people ask, well, what kind of research did you do for this film? Were you able to talk to all the men who had been on this mission? Because often when you're redoing, war stuff, it's like,
No.
no.
Did you know? Or
It's called Lone Survivor. And so, obviously he talked to the lone survivor, who wrote the memoir, but no, he was not able to interview anybody else. But the stars will tell you, oh, I dressed up in and Daniel Day-Lewis is famous for this. Like, he'll completely live in this period. Like, when he was doing Last of the Mohicans, he went and lived in the woods and wouldn't talk to anybody else unless he was in character as, the Mohican Man. And so in other cases, like Mark Wahlberg playing the cop in Patriots Day, where he's not playing an actual person, but he could talk to all these people, different people that were there. So they will tell you. If you have a question about the Mark Wahlberg movie, ask Mark Wahlberg. I realize he's not going to pick up the phone if you call him, but he's already told everybody everything. And especially if there's a controversy, it will be very easy to find this information. And if you need help, ask your librarian. Dr. Weinland, do you have anything to share with this fine group of young people?
I do. If you really want to pass this class, then tomorrow at 4:30, we'll be over in the president's dining room to have a free cookie.
you were going to class.
What's that?
You were going to class.
Well, that was just a beginning statement.
Gonna make
You have to stay the whole time because I have another class I have to get to.
At 4:30?
I have one from 6 to 8,
Oh.
and I don't get out of class until 4:30.
Oh. Well, you don't have to stay the whole
Well,
time.
the head of the national organization is going to be there. And so while he's standing up and making his remarks, you should just come in, walk past him and say, sorry, gotta get some cookies.
I mean, that's my goal.
All right, okay. And just, back out with your pile of cookies.
Well, if at all possible, please attend. I hope everybody is working hard. I know most of you are. Maybe some of you aren't, and maybe some of you don't even show up to class. But it's just, try to do that. Any other questions? We do have a question, yes.
So for the History Honor Society, is
Yeah.
it too late to join, or?
It is not. It's never too late to join.
It's too late to join.
It's too late to join for tomorrow.
Yeah,
But what'll happen is this organization is for, you don't have to be a history major, and next semester we will have another,
It's a national organization that's going to look
Induction.
great on your resume.
we have about 2 or 3 people already that will be inducted next semester, and I'd like to make that more. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. Anything else?
Do you have to pay money to be in this honor society?
There is a one-time fee for your lifetime, $50. $50, and if you're a member, you can apply for scholarships. You can be a part. They have different ways to publish things, conferences.
Will they
It's
accept Monopoly cash?
they will not. I don't even think they accept
But-
bitcoins.
Justin got things published and,
Yes, you can get
It's-
things published, and they have a conference where you could present papers. It's very good if you're wanting to go to graduate school, things like that.
and when you graduate, you get to wear special things. Now,
Exactly.
some schools do tassels and some schools do a ribbon thing, and since it's new, they haven't quite worked out.
I'm trying to
with the
get to the
powers that be.
sash, but they're saying, just the cords. I say everybody gets the cords, I don't want the sash. But
So when you go to graduate school, when you get a job,
yeah.
you were
So I can
entitled.
tell you more about it later, but anyway, tomorrow we will induct 11 people And so,
When you see Dr. Wineland at graduation, eventually, whenever you graduate. Of course, he's a big man, so he's got, nice big robes. But his whole thing, and all of the doctors, all the professors are, color-coded. So he's got the different colors of the different schools he went to, and then he's got the cords of the honor societies and everything. So, you see a guy just in there in a black hat, black robe,
yeah,
and he didn't do nothing.
I
But
wear
you
the
get all
sash.
the colors and the...
I wear the red sash.
He wears everything he got when he graduated from college at graduation.
Well, it's mostly graduate school PhD stuff, but that's your rank and your honor. So when you see the professors walking around in their get-ups, they've got it's
Get-ups.
color-coded to what their school is,
It
to what
is.
their profession is. They wear tassels of pins or whatever according to their awards. They got the different kinds of hats. So there's a whole code to all
Yeah,
this.
there's-
Sort of like a
there's a
Da
lot
Vinci
to it.
Code kind of secret society
It's
thing.
very secret.
And you too can be in the secret society if you got the grade point average and you've taken enough history classes.
And you can earn the $50 in different ways. All right. Anything else? It is now 2:50, so we